She means nothing to me." The words echoed through the crack in the door, each syllable a blade sliding between Kestrel's ribs. She stood frozen in the shadowed corridor, her hand still raised to knock, her heart shattering into pieces too small to ever reassemble. Alpha King Draven's voice carried the same cold authority it always did. "Tell the council, tell them all. The Shadowborn is a political arrangement, a convenience, nothing more." She heard murmurs of agreement, laughter even. Kestrel's wolf howled inside her chest, a sound of such raw anguish that she pressed her palm against her sternum to contain it. He'd chosen her just yesterday at the offering ceremony. Tomorrow, they would sign the contract. In 3 days, she would become his queen. And already, she meant nothing. She stepped back from the door on silent feet, her shadowborn grace ensuring no one heard her retreat. No one saw the tear that slipped down her cheek, tracing the crescent-shaped scar that marked her as cursed. She'd known, hadn't she? From the moment he'd chosen her, she'd known it couldn't be real. Shadowborns weren't wanted. They were tolerated at best, destroyed at worst. But some foolish part of her had hoped. What Kestrel didn't hear, what she couldn't have known, was what Draven said next, after the door clicked shut behind her retreating footsteps. "And if any of you threaten her, if any of you so much as look at her wrong, I will tear out your throats and mount your heads on the castle gates." His eyes blazed with something far more dangerous than indifference, something that looked terrifyingly like love. The offering ceremony was where wolves went to beg. Kestrel had spent 23 years avoiding this fate, 23 years hiding in the shadows of her father's estate, pretending she didn't exist, hoping that if she was quiet enough, small enough, invisible enough, they might forget what she was. But you couldn't hide a crescent scar forever, and you couldn't outrun a curse. The great hall of Valdris Castle stretched before her, cavernous and cold, its stone walls hung with banners bearing the silver wolf sigil of the royal pack. Hundreds of wolves had gathered to witness the ceremony, their combined scents creating an overwhelming tapestry of musk and anticipation and barely concealed disdain. 37 women stood on the raised platform. 37 unmated females who had failed to secure a place in any pack through traditional means. Too old, too scarred, too poor, too wrong in some fundamental way that made them unmarketable in the brutal economy of wolf society. Kestrel was the 38th. She stood at the very end of the line, as far from the torchlight as possible. Unlike the others, she didn't wear bright colors to attract attention or bare her neck in practiced submission. She wore a high-collared dress of deepest black, her dark hair arranged to fall across the left side of her face, partially obscuring the mark that had ruined her life. "Shadowborn," someone whispered from the crowd. "What's she doing here?" "Lord Ashford's cursed daughter. I heard she killed her own mother coming out of the womb. They should have drowned her at birth. That's what they did in the old days." Kestrel kept her gaze fixed on the floor. She'd heard it all before. The whispers, the accusations, the fear dressed up as righteous concern. Shadowborns were wolves born during a blood eclipse, marked by the gods, or demons, depending on who you asked, with a crescent scar somewhere on their body. Legend said they brought death to any pack foolish enough to claim them. Legend said a lot of things. The truth was simpler and more painful. Shadowborns were convenient scapegoats. When crops failed, blame the Shadowborn. When pups fell ill, blame the Shadowborn. When your own cruelty needed justification, well, the Shadowborn made such easy targets. Kestrel's mother had died in childbirth. But Kestrel hadn't killed her. The pack healer's incompetence had. Not that anyone wanted to hear that truth. Certainly not her father, who had never looked at his youngest daughter without hatred curdling in his eyes. The auctioneer, because that's what he was, despite the ceremony's prettier name, moved down the line with practiced efficiency. He announced bloodlines and virtues, fertility assessments and domestic skills. The women were evaluated like livestock, and one by one, minor lords and pack alphas stepped forward to claim their choices. A widow with 3 children was chosen by an elderly merchant who needed someone to manage his household. A she-wolf with a limp was selected by a farmer whose previous mate had run off with a traveling trader. No one even glanced at Kestrel. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't even disappointed anymore. Disappointment required hope, and hope was a luxury she'd abandoned long ago. Her father, Lord Mordecai Ashford, stood near the edge of the platform with her sister Ondine. He hadn't acknowledged Kestrel once since they'd arrived. When the offering ended with no takers, and it would, he'd finally have legal grounds to exile her. Pack law required families to support unmated females, but exile was permitted if a female was offered and refused 3 times. This was Kestrel's 3rd ceremony. The auctioneer had reached the second-to-last woman when the great doors exploded inward. Every conversation died, every head turned. The Alpha King of Valdris walked into the hall, and the air itself seemed to freeze in deference. Draven Valdris was not beautiful. Beautiful was too soft, too gentle a word. He was devastating in the way a winter storm was devastating, all sharp edges and lethal grace, and the promise of destruction barely leashed. Tall, taller than any wolf in the room, with hair the color of a moonless night and eyes like frost over steel. Cold. So impossibly cold. He moved through the crowd without a word, and they parted before him like water around stone. No one dared breathe in his direction. Your Majesty. The auctioneer nearly swallowed his tongue. We weren't expecting. The offering is nearly concluded, but if Your Majesty wishes to review the remaining— Continue, Draven said. Just one word. But it carried the weight of absolute authority. The auctioneer fumbled through his introduction of the final woman, a nervous creature barely out of adolescence who had been caught in some minor scandal. A baron's 3rd son stepped forward to claim her, looking relieved to have made any selection at all. And then there were none. The ceremony was over, except Draven hadn't moved. He stood in the center of the hall, his gaze sweeping across the platform. Past the claimed women being led away by their new masters. Past the auctioneer gathering his papers with trembling hands. Past Kestrel's father, who had begun to smile in anticipation of his daughter's exile, until those frost-steel eyes stopped, directly on her. Kestrel's wolf, dormant for so many years that she'd almost forgotten it existed, suddenly stirred. Not with fear, with something else entirely, something that felt horrifyingly like recognition. No, she thought desperately, don't look at me, don't see me. But Draven was already walking toward her, every step deliberate, every movement precise. The crowd held its collective breath. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell him, pine and snow and something darker beneath, like smoke from a fire that had never quite gone out. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. His expression revealed nothing. His scent was so tightly controlled she couldn't read a single emotion. Then his gaze dropped to her neck, to the crescent scar she hadn't managed to fully hide. Shadowborn, someone whispered. He can't possibly— This one. Draven's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade through silk. She'll do. Kestrel stopped breathing. The hall erupted into chaos, shocked protests, confused outcries, her father's voice rising above them all demanding to know the meaning of this outrage. But Kestrel heard none of it. She was too busy staring into the Alpha King's eyes, searching for some explanation, some reason, some hint of what he could possibly want with a creature like her. What she found instead was a wall of ice so thick she couldn't see anything beneath it. "Do you accept?" he asked, his voice pitched for her ears alone. The word stuck in her throat. Why? Something flickered in those frozen depths. Pain, maybe. Or perhaps she imagined it. That, he said quietly, is not the question I asked. Kestrel looked past him, at the crowd's horrified faces, at her father's purple rage, at her sister's wide, frightened eyes. If she refused, she would be exiled by morning, cast out of packed territory with nothing but the clothes on her back. She would survive weeks at best. Rogues didn't last long, and cursed rogues lasted even less. If she accepted, she would belong to the most powerful and most feared wolf in the kingdom. A male so cold that rumors said his own heart had frozen solid decades ago. Cold over exile. That was the real choice. Yes, she whispered. I accept. Draven nodded once, as if her answer had never been in doubt. Then he turned and walked away without another word, leaving Kestrel standing alone on the platform, suddenly belonging to a king she didn't understand, for reasons she couldn't fathom. Her wolf stirred again, restless and wanting, straining toward a male who had just claimed her with all the warmth of a man purchasing furniture. What have I done? Kestrel thought. Behind her, she heard her father demanding to speak with the king's advisors. Ahead of her, she watched Draven's retreating back, rigid and unyielding. And somewhere deep in her chest, in the hollow place where hope had died years ago, something impossible began to bloom. The carriage ride to the royal wing took an eternity. Kestrel sat alone on velvet cushions that were softer than anything she'd ever touched, watching Valdris Castle pass by through the small window. The structure seemed to go on forever. Towers piercing the gray sky, walls stretching in every direction, gardens and courtyards and training yards all blurring together into an overwhelming tapestry of wealth and power. This was her home now. This impossible place. This frozen kingdom ruled by a frozen king. A servant met her at the carriage door, a beta female with kind eyes and a careful smile. Lady Kestrel, I'm Marisol. I'll be attending to you during your stay. During your stay. Not from now on. Not as your permanent servant. The phrasing was deliberate. Nothing about this arrangement was permanent until the official bonding ceremony, and bonding ceremonies could be cancelled. Kestrel didn't point out the distinction. She simply nodded and followed Marisol through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. High ceilings, cold stone, tapestries depicting ancient battles in which wolves tore each other apart with artistic precision. Your chambers are in the East Wing, Marisol explained. Separate from His Majesty's rooms, of course. You'll have a sitting room, a bedchamber, a private bathing room, and a small study. Separate from his rooms. Of course. The king requests your presence in his study once you've had time to refresh yourself. Marisol's tone remained perfectly neutral. Shall I draw a bath? Yes, thank you. The chambers were beautiful. That was the only word for them. Soaring windows overlooking a winter garden, a fireplace large enough to stand in, furniture that looked like it cost more than her father's entire estate. Kestrel bathed quickly, too anxious to enjoy the heated water or the rose-scented oils Marisol provided. She dressed in the plainest of the gowns laid out for her. Deep green velvet with a modest neckline, and arranged her hair to fall across her scarred cheek. Then she stood before the mirror and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. He chose me, she reminded herself. Whatever his reasons, he chose me over everyone else. That has to mean something. But another voice, darker and more familiar, whispered, or it means you're the only one desperate enough to accept whatever terms he offers. Marisol led her through more corridors until they reached a heavy oak door guarded by two stone-faced soldiers. One knocked. A voice within commanded them to enter. Kestrel's heart hammered as she stepped inside. The study was large but surprisingly warm, a fire crackling in the hearth despite the summer season. Bookshelves lined every wall, crammed with volumes in languages she didn't recognize. Maps covered a massive desk, and standing by the window, backlit by gray afternoon light, was the Alpha King. He didn't turn as she entered, just stood there, a dark silhouette against the pale sky, radiating that same impossible coldness she'd felt in the great hall. "Leave us," he said. Marisol bowed and retreated, the door clicking shut behind her. Silence stretched between them. 10 seconds. 20. A full minute in which neither of them moved. Finally, he turned. Up close, in private, he was somehow even more overwhelming. Those frost steel eyes swept over her with clinical precision, cataloging details, revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Sit," he said. She sat in the chair nearest the fire, grateful for its warmth. Draven remained standing, his posture rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. "I will explain this once. I expect you to listen carefully and ask questions only when I've finished. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I need a queen." The words came out flat, emotionless. Not a true mate, not a love match. A political arrangement that satisfies the Council's demands while ensuring I maintain control of my kingdom. You will serve that purpose. Kestrel's stomach dropped. She'd expected something like this, but hearing it stated so baldly still hurt in ways she hadn't anticipated. "The Council has been pressuring me to mate for years," Draven continued. "They've paraded an endless stream of noble daughters before me, each one more politically connected than the last, each one representing a faction that would gain power through marriage to the crown." He moved to his desk, picking up a document covered in dense script. "I won't give any faction that advantage, but I also cannot remain unmated indefinitely. The Council would eventually find grounds to challenge my rule." He looked at her, and for just a moment something flickered in those frozen depths. A Shadowborn solves both problems. Understanding dawned, cold and clarifying. "You chose me because no one will question why you don't truly claim me," Kestrel said slowly. "They'll assume you're protecting the pack from my curse." "Precisely. So I'm... what? A shield? A convenient excuse?" "You're a solution." He set the document down. "You'll be my queen in name. You'll have chambers, servants, gowns, jewels, everything befitting your station. You'll appear beside me at official functions. You'll project an image of royal partnership." "And in private?" His expression didn't change. "In private, we will have no relationship whatsoever. Separate chambers, separate lives. I will never mark you, never claim you, and never touch you in any way." Kestrel should have felt relief. This was exactly what she should want. Safety without intimacy, protection without vulnerability. No risk of growing attached to someone who would inevitably come to resent her curse. So why did his words sting like salt in an open wound? "And if I conceive an heir?" she asked. "The Council will expect—" "You won't." Draven cut her off. "As I said, I will never touch you." "Then how?" "I have time. Years, perhaps decades. Wolves live long lives, and councils can be managed." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "By the time alternative arrangements become necessary, this will no longer be your concern." "This will no longer be your concern." The dismissal was absolute. "You should know," Kestrel said carefully, "that I have no political connections, no wealth, no powerful family who will support your rule. My father would celebrate my death." "I'm aware." "Then what possible benefit? You're a Shadowborn." For the first time, something almost like emotion flickered across his face. "You've survived 23 years of persecution and hatred, and you still held your head high on that platform today. You didn't beg. You didn't weep. You didn't try to hide what you are." Kestrel blinked. "I did try to hide what I am. I wore my hair to cover my scar. But you didn't lie. You didn't deny it when the whispers started." He studied her with unsettling intensity. "You stood there and endured. That kind of strength is rare." She didn't know what to say to that. It didn't feel like strength. It felt like numbness, the dead-eyed resignation of an animal that had been beaten too many times to fight back. The contract. Draven picked up the document again and held it toward her. Read it. Consider it. I'll expect your answer by morning. Kestrel took the papers with trembling fingers. And if I refuse? Then you'll be returned to your father, and the offering results will stand. You'll be exiled by week's end. He paused. That is not a threat, simply a statement of fact. Cold over exile. Again and again, the same impossible choice. I don't need until morning, Kestrel said. I accept. Draven's eyes narrowed. You haven't read the terms. I've read enough. She met his gaze, drawing on every ounce of the strength he seemed to think she possessed. You're offering me safety, protection, a place in the world. In exchange, I agree to ask nothing of you, to expect nothing, to be nothing except a convenient political solution. Something shifted in his expression. She couldn't read it. That's accurate, he said slowly. Then I accept. She stood, clutching the contract against her chest. I've been nothing my entire life, Your Majesty. At least this way, I'll be nothing in comfort. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, he murmured, That's the first time anyone's accepted my terms without protest. Perhaps I'm the first person who understood them. He looked away, something like discomfort flickering across his features. Marisol will show you to your chambers. The official contract signing will take place tomorrow before the council. Your family will be summoned as witnesses. My father will be furious. Your father will be silent, or he will be removed from the proceedings. Draven's gaze swept to Kestrel. You belong to the crown now. Whatever power he held over you is gone. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they just reminded Kestrel how alone she truly was. She curtsied, a formal gesture she'd never mastered, and turned toward the door. Lady Kestrel. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. The bonding ceremony will take place in 3 days, Draven said. After that, certain expectations will arise. The pack will watch how I treat you, how you treat me. There can be no hint that this arrangement is anything other than a normal royal match. I understand. I need you to understand something else. His voice dropped, taking on an edge that made her wolf shiver. In public, I will treat you with the respect owed to a queen, but I will also treat you with distance, coldness even. There can be no suggestion that I harbor any personal feelings for you, because that would undermine the political purpose of our arrangement. Yes. Kestrel nodded slowly. Then I will match your distance, Your Majesty. I will be the perfect ice queen. She pulled open the door and stepped through, her head held high, her wolf howling silently in her chest. She'd made it 3 steps down the corridor when she heard it. A door had been left ajar behind her, not the study, but an adjoining chamber. Through the gap, voices drifted. Cannot believe you actually went through with it. A male voice, sharp with disbelief. A Shadowborn, Draven? The council is already spinning this into a narrative of instability. Let them spin. The king's voice, cold as ever. Lord Severin is demanding an audience. He's claiming the selection was rigged, that his daughter Lycia should have been. Severin can demand whatever he likes. And when he demands to know why? When he asks what possible value a cursed wolf could bring to the throne? A pause. Then, in a voice so devoid of emotion it barely sounded human. Tell him the truth. She means nothing to me. Kestrel's heart stopped. Nothing? The other male sounded skeptical. You walked past 100 qualified candidates. Nothing. Draven's voice cracked like ice breaking. Tell the council. Tell them all. The Shadowborn is a political arrangement, a convenience, a tool to manage their ambitions. Nothing more. She didn't hear the rest. She was already walking away, moving on silent shadowborn feet, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. A tool. A convenience. Nothing. Of course, of course. What had she expected? Warmth? Kindness? Some hidden depth beneath all that ice? Stupid. So unbearably stupid. She'd spent her whole life being nothing to everyone. Why had she imagined, even for a moment, that a crown would change that? Kestrel made it to her chambers before the first sob escaped. She pressed her face into a pillow that smelled like lavender and something expensive, and screamed until her throat burned raw. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her spine, and began to read the contract. If she was going to be nothing, she would at least be nothing on her own terms. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Kestrel understood that the moment she stepped through its towering doors the next morning. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow overhead. Massive stone pillars lined the walls like silent sentinels. And at the far end, on a raised dais, sat a throne carved from a single block of black obsidian. Draven occupied that throne with the casual authority of a man born to rule. He wore formal black, his expression carved from the same stone as his seat, his eyes betraying nothing as he watched her approach. Around him, arranged in a semicircle of ornate chairs, sat the 12 members of the Royal Council. Kestrel had memorized their names from the documents Marisol had provided. Lords and ladies representing the most powerful pacts in the kingdom, each one watching her with varying degrees of hostility, curiosity, and calculation. She felt their gazes like physical weight, pressing against her skin, searching for weakness. She means nothing to me. The words echoed in her mind with every step. She'd barely slept, those 5 syllables running circles in her brain until dawnlight had finally crept through her windows. But she'd also made a decision. If she meant nothing, if she was truly just a tool, a convenience, a political solution, then she would be the most useful tool he'd ever acquired. She would give him no cause for complaint. She would play her role so perfectly that he would never regret his choice, and she would guard her heart so completely that his indifference would never wound her again. Lady Kestrel Ashford, the court herald announced, his voice booming through the chamber, presented for formal contract signing and pending bonding to His Royal Majesty, Alpha King Draven Valdris. Kestrel curtsied deeply, her movements practiced and precise. She'd spent half the night rehearsing before her mirror, determined not to embarrass herself. "Rise," Draven said. She straightened, meeting his gaze without flinching. Let him see nothing in her eyes but calm acceptance. Let him think his words hadn't touched her at all. "The contract has been prepared according to His Majesty's specifications," one of the counselors announced, an older male with silver hair and calculating eyes. Lord Brennick, she recalled, the one whose daughter had been passed over. "However, there are certain irregularities that the council wishes to address." Irregularities? Draven's voice could have frozen the fire in the hearths. "The selection process," Lord Brennick pressed on, seemingly immune to his king's displeasure. "Your Majesty bypassed established protocols. The offering is meant to provide options for packless wolves seeking placement in noble households. It was never intended as a mechanism for selecting a queen. The offering provides unmated females to males seeking mates," Draven said flatly. "I am an unmated male. I sought a mate. I fail to see the irregularity." "Your Majesty could have chosen from any noble house in the kingdom," Lady Varelia interjected, a sharp-featured female with hair the color of burnished copper. "Alliances could have been forged, treaties strengthened. Instead, you selected." Her gaze swept over Kestrel with undisguised contempt. "A shadowborn with no connections, no dowry, and a curse that could doom our entire pack." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. Kestrel kept her expression serene. She'd known this would happen. She was prepared. What she wasn't prepared for was Draven's response. Lady Varelia. His voice dropped to something soft and dangerous. Are you questioning my judgment? The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Lady Varelia's face went pale. No, Your Majesty. I merely... Because it sounded very much like you were suggesting I lack the wisdom to select my own mate. Draven rose from his throne, and suddenly the chamber felt much smaller. It sounded like you were implying that I, the Alpha King of Valdris, conqueror of the Northern Reaches, destroyer of the Crimson Pack Rebellion, need guidance from my counsel on matters of the heart. Silence. Absolute terrified silence. I don't, Draven said. Need guidance, on any matter. But I'll offer you some, free of charge. He descended the dais steps with predatory grace, stopping directly before Lady Varelia's seat. My queen is not a topic for debate. My selection is not a subject for critique. And if I hear one more word questioning the female I've chosen to stand beside me, I will assume the speaker has ambitions to the throne themselves. Lady Varelia looked ready to faint. Your Majesty, I never... Excellent. Then we understand each other. He turned back toward the dais, but his gaze caught Kestrel's as he passed. Just for a moment. Just long enough for her to see. Something. Not warmth. Not softness. But not pure ice either. Something almost like reassurance. He's defending me, she thought, bewildered. Why would he defend me if I mean nothing? The contract, Draven commanded, settling back onto his throne. Present it for signing. A scribe hurried forward, unfurling a scroll across a portable writing desk. The terms were extensive. Kestrel had spent hours reading them the night before, but the key points were simple. She would become Queen Consort of Valdris. She would receive all rights and privileges of her station. She would appear at official functions alongside the king. She would not be marked or physically claimed until such time as both parties agreed. She would not be set aside or divorced except for treason against the crown. That last clause had surprised her. It meant he couldn't simply discard her when she was no longer useful. Whatever his reasons, he was committing to her in a way that went beyond mere convenience. Lady Kestrel. The scribe offered her a quill. Your signature, please. Kestrel stepped forward, acutely aware of every eye in the room following her movement. Her hand trembled slightly as she took the quill. Nerves, exhaustion, the accumulated weight of everything happening too fast. She signed her name in careful script. Kestrel Ashford. And the king's signature. The scribe continued. Draven descended once more, taking the quill from her fingers. Their hands brushed, just barely, the lightest grays of skin against skin. And Kestrel felt a jolt of sensation so intense she nearly gasped. Cold. His touch was cold. Not cool, not merely lacking warmth, but genuinely, unnaturally cold. As if winter lived beneath his skin. She looked up, startled, but his expression betrayed nothing. He signed his name with a few decisive strokes, Draven Valdris, and handed the quill back to the scribe. It is done, the herald announced. Lady Kestrel Ashford is hereby contracted to Alpha King Draven Valdris. The bonding ceremony shall take place in 3 days' time. Polite applause scattered through the chamber. Kestrel caught Lord Brennick exchanging a dark look with Lord Severin, the male whose daughter had also been passed over. Their expressions promised trouble to come. One final matter, Lord Severin spoke up, his voice smooth as oil. The Ashford family should be permitted to witness this historic moment. I believe Lord Mordecai and Lady Ondine are waiting outside. Kestrel's blood turned to ice. Bring them in, Draven said. The doors opened and her father strode through, her sister trailing behind. Lord Mordecai Ashford was a big man, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, with a face that might have been handsome before cruelty carved permanent lines around his mouth. He wore his finest clothes, trying to impress the court, no doubt, but nothing could disguise the hatred burning in his eyes as he looked at his youngest daughter. "Your Majesty," he bowed deeply, "I am honored to witness this momentous occasion." The way he said momentous made it sound like an obscenity. "Lord Ashford." Draven's voice gave nothing away. "You seem surprised by your daughter's fortune." "Not surprised, Your Majesty." Mordecai straightened, his smile sharp enough to cut. "I'm certain you have your reasons for selecting such an unusual bride. A king's mind works in mysterious ways." "Indeed it does." Ondine stepped forward, curtsying gracefully. Where Kestrel was all shadows and stillness, her older sister was sunlight and movement, golden hair, bright eyes, and a beauty so conventional it had made her their father's favorite from the moment of her birth. "Congratulations, sister," Ondine said. Her voice was sweet, her eyes were poison. "I never imagined you'd ascend so high, though I suppose even a Shadowborn can be useful, in the right circumstances." Kestrel felt Draven's attention sharpen. "Lady Ondine," he said quietly, "you seem to have something you wish to say." Ondine's smile faltered. "Only that I'm happy for my sister, Your Majesty." Your happiness is noted." He looked at Mordecai. "Lord Ashford, the crown thanks you for producing such a resilient daughter. Her strength will serve Valdris well." Mordecai's jaw tightened. "Her strength?" "Yes." "You should be proud." "I am overcome with joy, Your Majesty." The words dripped with so much sarcasm that several counselors shifted uncomfortably. Kestrel saw Lord Brennick lean toward Lord Severin, whispered words passing between them. "I would speak with my daughter privately," Mordecai announced, "before she becomes lost to us entirely. A father's right, surely." "No," Draven said. Mordecai blinked. "Your Majesty?" "Lady Kestrel is contracted to the crown. Any private conversations she has are at her discretion, not yours." Draven's gaze swept to Kestrel. "Do you wish to speak with your father privately?" Every eye in the room turned to her. Kestrel thought of 23 years of silence and shadows, of being told she was cursed, worthless, better off dead, of the way her father looked at her like she was something rotten he'd found under his boot. "No, Your Majesty," she said clearly. "I have nothing to say to Lord Ashford that requires privacy." Mordecai's face purpled. "Then we're finished here," Draven said. "The contract is signed. The bonding will proceed as scheduled. Lord Ashford, Lady Ondine, you may attend the ceremony as honored guests. Or not. The choice is yours." He rose from his throne and walked toward a side door without waiting for a response. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at Kestrel. "My queen, walk with me." It wasn't a request. Kestrel followed, feeling her father's rage burning into her back with every step. They walked through empty corridors in silence, their footsteps echoing against cold stone. Kestrel kept 3 paces behind Draven, unsure of the protocol, unsure of everything. Finally, in a gallery lined with portraits of past kings, he stopped. "Your father hates you," he said without preamble. "Yes." "Why?" Kestrel hesitated. He wanted nothing from her. He'd made that clear. Why would he care about her history? But he was watching her, waiting. And something in his expression, some small fracture in all that ice, made her answer. "My mother died giving birth to me," she said quietly. "He blamed the Shadowborn curse, said I killed her just by existing." She touched her scarred cheek unconsciously. "My sister was 3 when I was born. She doesn't remember much of our mother, but she remembers enough to hate me too. I grew up being told I was the reason our family was broken." Draven said nothing. "I tried to be good," Kestrel continued, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I tried to be quiet, helpful, and invisible. I thought if I was perfect enough, he might eventually see me as more than a curse, but nothing I did was ever enough. He enrolled me in every offering from the moment I turned 18. He wanted me gone. And your sister? Ondine was engaged once, to a nobleman named Corwin Teller. Kestrel's throat tightened. He was kind to me, the only person who ever was. When he died in a hunting accident, Ondine blamed me, said my curse must have touched him. Did it? No. The word came out fierce. I never even touched him. I barely spoke to him. But Shadowborns make convenient scapegoats. When anything goes wrong, we're always the first to blame. Silence stretched between them. When Kestrel finally looked up, she found Draven watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Your father will try to undermine you, he said finally. He'll whisper poison to anyone who listens. He'll tell stories about your curse, your past, anything he thinks might damage your position. I know. I won't let him succeed. Kestrel blinked. Why? Because you're mine now. The words came out low, almost possessive. Whatever his reasons for hating you, whatever stories he spreads, you belong to the crown, and I protect what's mine. Her heart did something strange in her chest. A flutter, a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. Don't, she warned herself. He doesn't mean it the way it sounds. You're a possession, remember? A tool. A convenience. She means nothing to me. Thank you, Your Majesty, she said carefully. Draven. What? When we're alone, call me Draven. He looked away, and for just a moment she thought she saw discomfort flicker across his features. Formality becomes tiresome. Draven, she repeated softly. Something shifted in his expression, something that almost looked like pain. The bonding ceremony, he said, abruptly changing the subject. There are certain expectations. The pack will want proof that the match is genuine, public displays of unity. I understand. I'll need to touch you. The words came out stiff, reluctant. Hold your hand, perhaps your waist. Nothing inappropriate, but contact will be necessary. I understand, she said again. It will mean nothing. His voice hardened. Don't misinterpret it. She means nothing to me. I won't, Kestrel promised. He nodded once, sharply, and walked away without another word. Kestrel stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by portraits of dead kings, wondering why a man so determined to feel nothing had looked. Just for a moment, like he was fighting desperately not to feel everything. Behind her, hidden in the shadows of an alcove, a figure watched her walk away. Lord Severin smiled, his eyes glittering with calculation. The Shadowborn Queen had weaknesses. Obvious ones, and weaknesses could be exploited. The morning of the bonding ceremony dawned gray and cold, as if the sky itself knew what kind of marriage was about to take place. Kestrel stood before the mirror in her chambers, while Marisol and two other attendants worked their quiet magic. They'd woven silver threads through her dark hair, arranged it in an elaborate crown of braids that swept away from her face. Her gown was deep violet, Valdres royal colors, with a neckline that dipped lower than anything she'd ever worn. The crescent scar on her cheek was fully visible. Your Majesty, Marisol said softly, if you'd prefer, we could arrange your hair to cover... No. Kestrel's voice surprised her with its steadiness. If I'm to be queen, they'll see what I am eventually. Better to face it now than hide forever. Marisol's eyes warmed with something that might have been respect. As you wish, Your Majesty. The walk to the Great Hall felt like walking toward her own execution. Guards flanked her, their faces impassive, their presence simultaneously protective and imprisoning. Whispers followed her through every corridor. Look at her face, the curse mark. His Majesty must be mad. Or desperate. Perhaps there's something wrong with him. Kestrel kept her chin high. Let them whisper. Let them stare. She was done shrinking. The Great Hall had been transformed. Thousands of candles blazed from every surface, their light catching on silver decorations, on the polished stone floor, on the massive wolf sigil hanging behind the obsidian dais. The entire court had gathered. Nobles in their finest clothes, common wolves pressed against the walls for a glimpse of their new queen. Counselors arranged in formal rows like judges at a trial. And at the center of it all, waiting before the ancient altar stone, stood Draven. He wore black, as always, but this black was different. Formal, royal, edged with silver embroidery that caught the candlelight and made him look like something carved from shadow and moonlight. His pale eyes found hers across the crowded hall, and Kestrel felt that same jolt of awareness she'd experienced every time their gazes met. She means nothing to me. She clutched the words like armor, protection against the treacherous flutter in her chest. The ceremony was ancient, steeped in traditions older than the castle itself. The high priestess, a female so old she seemed made of parchment and patience, spoke words in the old tongue that Kestrel barely understood. Something about bonds and duty and the joining of two wolves before the eyes of the moon goddess. Then it was time for the claiming marks. Your hands, the priestess instructed. Draven extended his palm. After a moment's hesitation, Kestrel placed her hand in his. His skin was ice, colder even than before, so cold it almost burned. Kestrel couldn't suppress her gasp. Draven's fingers tightened around hers, a warning squeeze. The priestess bound their wrists together with a silver cord, chanting words that seemed to vibrate in Kestrel's bones. Something stirred deep inside her, something primal and ancient. Her wolf rising to the surface for the first time in years. The binding words, the priestess commanded. Speak them. Draven turned to face her fully. His expression was stone, but this close, Kestrel could see tiny fractures in his composure. A muscle ticking in his jaw. A flicker of something in those frost-gray eyes. I claim you, he said, his voice carrying through the hall. As my mate, my queen, my partner in rule. Your enemies are my enemies. Your pain is my pain, from this moment until death separates us. Traditional words, ancient vows, empty of personal meaning. So why did they make her heart clench? I claim you, Kestrel responded, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. As my mate, my king, my partner in rule. Your enemies are my enemies. Your pain is my pain, from this moment until death separates us. The priestess smiled. The marks. This was the moment Kestrel had dreaded. In a traditional bonding, mates would bite each other's necks, leaving permanent claiming marks that would announce their bond to every wolf who encountered them. She and Draven had agreed there would be no physical marking, but the court didn't know that. Draven leaned close, his lips brushing her ear. To the watching crowd, it would look like a tender moment. An intimate whisper before the claiming bite. Trust me, he breathed, so quietly only she could hear. Before she could respond, his mouth descended to her neck. Kestrel tensed, expecting teeth. But instead, she felt only the press of cold lips against her pulse point. He held the contact for a long moment, his breath icy against her skin, his hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. To everyone watching, it looked like a claiming bite. But there was no pain, no breaking of skin, no mark. He was protecting her, giving her the appearance of a claimed mate without the reality of one. Something cracked inside Kestrel's chest, something she'd been trying desperately to keep frozen. Draven pulled back, and his eyes met hers. For just a heartbeat, the ice in them seemed to thin, revealing something raw and desperate beneath. Then the mask slammed back into place. Your turn, the priestess said. The queen must mark her king. Kestrel hesitated. She'd never bitten anyone in her life. Her wolf had been so suppressed for so long that she wasn't even sure she could summon the instinct. Draven tilted his head. exposing the strong column of his throat. His pulse beat visibly beneath pale skin. "Trust me," he'd said. Kestrel rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his neck. She let her teeth graze the skin, just barely, just enough to feel the thrum of his heartbeat beneath her mouth. He shuddered. The reaction was so unexpected, so visceral, that Kestrel nearly pulled back in shock. But his hand came up to grip her waist, holding her in place, his fingers digging in with something that felt almost like desperation. "Hold," he whispered against her hair. "Just a moment longer." So she held, her lips against his throat, his hands on her body, the silver cord binding them together. And for that one moment, it didn't feel like a political arrangement. It felt like something real. The priestess's voice shattered the spell. "It is done. The bond is sealed. I present to you Alpha King Draven Valdris and his queen, Kestrel Valdris. Long may they reign." The hall erupted in cheers, some genuine, most politely forced. Kestrel stepped back, her heart racing, her mind spinning with confusion. Draven released her waist, and the loss of his touch left her feeling strangely bereft. "The feast begins," the priestess announced. "Let us celebrate our new queen." The celebration lasted hours. Kestrel sat at the high table beside Draven, accepting congratulations from an endless stream of nobles whose names she couldn't remember, and whose smiles never reached their eyes. Draven played his part perfectly, the attentive husband, the proud king, his hand occasionally resting on hers for the benefit of watching eyes. Every touch sent that same jolt through her. Every brush of cold fingers reminded her that something was wrong with him, something beyond mere personality. "You're doing well," Draven murmured during a lull between well-wishers. "Better than expected." "Thank you for the overwhelming praise." His lips twitched, almost a smile. "I meant it as a compliment." "Then I accept it as one." They lapsed into silence, watching the dancers swirl across the floor below. The music was beautiful, haunting strings and deep drums that seemed to pulse in time with Kestrel's heartbeat. "You didn't bite me?" she said quietly. Draven's hand stilled on his wine goblet. "No." "Why?" "Because a claiming mark is permanent." He didn't look at her. "It cannot be undone. If circumstances change, if this arrangement no longer suits either of us, a mark would complicate separation. If this arrangement no longer suits either of us." The words should have reassured her. He was being practical, thinking ahead, and giving her an escape route. Instead, they just reminded her of her place. "Your Majesties." Lord Severin appeared before the high table, his smile smooth as poisoned silk. "Might I request the honor of a dance with our new queen?" Kestrel felt Draven tense beside her. "The queen is tired," Draven said flatly. "Perhaps another time." Surely one dance couldn't exhaust her. Severin's eyes glittered with challenge. "Unless there's some reason you'd prefer to keep her isolated?" The implication was clear. The king was hiding something. The Shadowborn queen was not fit for public interaction. Kestrel stood before Draven could respond. "I would be honored, Lord Severin." Draven's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Kestrel." It was the first time he'd used her name without her title. Something about the way he said it, urgent, almost pleading, made her pause. "One dance," she said quietly. "I can handle one dance." His jaw clenched, but he released her. Lord Severin led her onto the dance floor with exaggerated courtesy, positioning them where the entire court could watch. The music shifted to a slower tempo, intimate and swaying. "You're braver than I expected," Severin said as they began to move. "Most Shadowborns I've met are cowering creatures." "Most Shadowborns you've met have been given reason to cower." "True." His hand tightened on her waist. "Tell me, Your Majesty, do you know why the king truly chose you?" "I imagine you're about to tell me." "He needs a shield." Severin's voice dropped. meant only for her ears. His Majesty has difficulties, complications that make a traditional mating impossible. You're perfect for him. A female no one expects him to actually love, a shadowborn he can keep at arm's length without raising suspicion. Kestrel's stomach turned. And what complications would those be? Surely you've noticed. Severin smiled. The cold, the distance, the way he flinches from genuine connection. He leaned closer. Our king is cursed, Your Majesty, has been since birth. His touch brings winter. His love brings death. The words hit her like a physical blow. You're lying. Am I? Severin spun her, pulling her close as the music swelled. Ask him yourself. Ask him why he's never taken a mistress. Why every female who's shared his bed has woken with frostbite. Why his own mother died with ice in her veins when he was barely 3 years old. Kestrel's mind raced. The unnatural cold of his skin. The way he'd warned her again and again that their relationship would be nothing. The desperate edge she'd glimpsed beneath his frozen exterior. His love brings death. Even if that were true, she managed, what concern is it of yours? Because, Your Majesty, I believe you deserve to know what kind of monster you've married. Severin's smile sharpened. And because I believe you might be useful to those of us who think Valdris deserves a different kind of ruler. The music ended. Kestrel stepped back, her composure cracking around the edges. Thank you for the dance, Lord Severin. It was illuminating. She turned and walked away on legs that threatened to buckle. Behind her, she felt Severin's satisfied gaze following every step. And at the high table, Draven watched her approach with eyes that had gone completely, terrifyingly cold. The wedding chambers were not what Kestrel expected. She'd braced herself for cold stone and sparse furnishings, something befitting the frozen king who ruled this place. Instead, she found warmth. Thick carpets, roaring fireplaces, walls hung with tapestries depicting forests and running wolves under silver moonlight, and candles. Hundreds of them, their soft glow turning the room into something almost romantic. Someone went to a lot of trouble, she thought. Someone who isn't supposed to care. Marisol helped her out of the elaborate gown and into a nightdress of deep blue silk. The fabric was impossibly soft against her skin, finer than anything she'd ever worn. His Majesty commissioned it specifically for tonight, Marisol said, catching her expression. He was very particular about the color. Said it should match your eyes. Kestrel didn't know what to do with that information, so she filed it away alongside all the other contradictions that made up her husband. She means nothing to me, but he'd chosen a nightdress to match her eyes. His love brings death. But he'd held her at the altar like she was something precious. A knock at the connecting door made her heart lurch. Enter, she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Draven stepped through, and Kestrel felt the temperature in the room drop despite the blazing fires. He'd changed from his formal attire into simple black trousers and a white shirt, unlaced at the throat. His feet were bare. His hair, usually so perfectly controlled, fell loose around his shoulders. He looked almost vulnerable. Marisol, he said, without looking at the attendant. Leave us. The maid curtsied and disappeared through the main door. They were alone. Lord Severin spoke to you, Draven said. Not a question. He did. What did he tell you? Kestrel studied him, the rigid set of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands hung carefully at his sides, as if he was afraid of what they might do. He told me you were cursed, she said, that your touch brings winter, that your love brings death. Draven didn't flinch, didn't defend himself, just stood there, watching her with those frost-gray eyes. Is it true? She asked. A long pause, then, very quietly, yes. The single word cracked something open inside her. Not horror, she'd been expecting horror, not even fear, something closer to understanding. Is that why you chose me? She asked. Because you thought you could never love a Shadowborn? Because my curse would cancel out yours? In part. And the other part? Drevin looked away. For the first time since she'd met him, he seemed uncertain. Lost. I watched you, he admitted. At the offering. Before I entered the hall, I watched through the gallery windows. I saw how the others treated you. The whispers, the contempt, the way they looked at you like you were something to be scraped off their shoes. He moved toward the fireplace, staring into the flames. And I saw how you bore it. The dignity, the stillness. You didn't crumble. You didn't beg. You stood there like a queen already, even when everyone around you was trying to make you feel like nothing. Kestrel's throat tightened. I thought... He stopped, his hands clenching at his sides. I thought if anyone could survive being married to me, it would be you. Someone who already knew what it meant to be cursed. Someone who wouldn't expect warmth I cannot give. And the council? The political excuse? Real, but secondary. He turned to face her. I needed a reason they would accept, but the truth is simpler and more selfish. Which is? I'm tired. The words came out raw, exhausted. Tired of being alone. Tired of watching everyone I care about slowly freeze. I thought perhaps with you, I could have companionship, presence. Someone in the same room who wouldn't die from it. Kestrel absorbed this. The king of Valderis, the most powerful wolf in the kingdom, was lonely. So desperately lonely that he'd chosen a Shadowborn just to have someone who might survive his company. Lord Severin said your mother died, she said carefully. That you were 3 years old? Pain flashed across his features. My first memory is her face going blue, her skin cracking like ice. My father screaming at me to let go, but I couldn't. I didn't understand. I just wanted her to hold me. Oh, Draven. Don't. The word came out harsh. Don't pity me. I've survived 29 years with this curse. I'll survive 29 more. All I ask is that you don't pretend it isn't there. I wouldn't dream of it. Kestrel found herself moving toward him, drawn by something stronger than common sense. But neither will I pretend that your curse makes you a monster. He went very still as she approached. You should keep your distance. Should I? She stopped an arm's length away. You've touched me twice now. At the contract signing, at the altar. I'm not frozen. Brief contact is manageable, but extended touch, emotional connection. He shook his head. The curse strengthens with intimacy. The more I feel, the colder I become, the more dangerous. Then how are we supposed to... She gestured vaguely at the wedding chamber. There are certain expectations. I know. He looked almost sick. I've thought about this for weeks. Tried to find alternatives, but the council will demand proof of consummation. If we don't, they'll use it against us. Against you. His voice hardened. They'll say the king found his Shadowborn queen too repulsive to bed. They'll use it as grounds to annul the marriage. And you'd be forced to choose someone else. Someone political. Someone whose faction would gain power. Exactly. Kestrel considered this. The logical thing would be to refuse, to accept the annulment, to escape this frozen trap before it closed around her completely. But she thought of Lord Severin's oily smile, of her father's hatred, of the life waiting for her outside these walls, exile, persecution, eventual death. And she thought of Draven, alone in this castle for 29 years, unable to touch anyone without hurting them. One night, she said. We have to survive one night without me freezing. After that, we can maintain separate chambers. You said brief contact was manageable. Surely we can manage something brief enough to satisfy the council. Draven stared at her. You would risk it? Knowing what I am? I'm a Shadowborn. I've been risking death my entire life. She met his gaze steadily. At least this time, I get to choose my danger. Something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. There are techniques, he said slowly. Ways to minimize skin contact. Ways to keep the cold from transferring too deeply. Then teach me. He moved toward her with predatory grace, stopping so close she could feel the chill radiating from his body. Slowly, giving her every chance to retreat, he reached up and touched her cheek. Cold. So cold it made her gasp. Still with me? He murmured. Still with me, she confirmed. His thumb traced her cheekbone, her jaw, the curve of her lower lip. Everywhere he touched went numb, then tingling, then warm again as her body fought back against the cold. Your wolf is strong, he observed. Stronger than I expected. She's been suppressed my whole life. Maybe she's been saving her strength. Almost. Almost. He smiled. I'm going to kiss you now, he said. Tell me if it becomes too much. He didn't wait for permission. His mouth descended on hers, cold as winter wind, demanding as a blizzard. Kestrel gasped against his lips. The shock of the temperature, the shock of being kissed, the shock of wanting more. His hand slid into her hair, cradling her skull. His body pressed against hers, all lean muscle and impossible chill. And beneath the cold, beneath the careful control, she felt something else. Hunger. He was starving for this, for touch, for connection, for anything that felt like warmth. She could feel it in the way he kissed her. Desperate, almost reverent. Like she was water and he'd been dying of thirst. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Your lips are blue, he observed. I don't care. Something cracked in his expression. You should care. You should be running from me. I've spent my whole life running. Kestrel fisted her hands in his shirt, pulling him closer despite the cold seeping through the fabric. I'm done running. She kissed him this time. The rest of the night was a careful dance of touch and withdrawal, warmth and cold, connection and restraint. Draven was achingly gentle, checking in constantly, pulling back whenever the temperature dropped too far. Kestrel learned his boundaries through trial and error, where he could touch without danger, how long he could hold her before the cold became painful, which parts of her body could withstand the most contact. It was nothing like she'd imagined, nothing like the cold, clinical union she'd braced herself for. It was tentative and terrifying and real. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the dark, Draven's arm draped carefully over her waist, his body a careful distance from hers. You survived, he murmured against her hair. Was there ever any doubt? Yes. He pulled her closer, just slightly and just enough. There's always doubt. Kestrel closed her eyes, letting herself sink into this impossible moment. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they would go back to being strangers, maintaining distance, playing their political roles. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself feel safe. She didn't see the thin layer of frost spreading across the window panes behind them. She didn't notice the temperature in the room dropping degree by degree. And she didn't see the look on Draven's face as he watched her sleep. A look of pure, devastating terror. Because he'd felt something tonight. Something he hadn't felt in decades. And feeling, for a cursed king, was the beginning of the end. 3 months passed. 3 months of separate chambers and public appearances and carefully maintained distance. 3 months of polite conversation at formal dinners and chaste hand-holding at council meetings and absolutely nothing more. At least, that's what Kestrel told herself. The truth was more complicated. It started with small things. Draven began appearing at her door in the evenings, claiming he needed to discuss political matters or review upcoming schedules. They would talk for hours, about the kingdom, about their childhoods, about everything and nothing. He brought her books from his private collection. She taught him to play a card game her mother had loved. Then the visits became longer. He started bringing dinner, dismissing the servants so they could eat alone. They talked about deeper things. His guilt over his mother's death, her pain at being blamed for things she couldn't control. She learned about the burden of wearing a crown. He learned about the freedom of having nothing left to lose. The first time he stayed past midnight, they sat before the fire sharing a bottle of wine, and Draven laughed at something she said. Actually laughed. The sound was so unexpected, so beautiful, that Kestrel stopped breathing. His face transformed when he laughed, the ice cracking, the frost thawing. Something warm and alive emerging from beneath all that cold control. She fell in love with him in that moment, completely, helplessly, hopelessly. The second time he stayed past midnight, she woke up with his arms around her, his cold body pressed against her back, his breath a frigid whisper against her neck. He'd fallen asleep. For the first time in decades, he'd let his guard down enough to sleep in someone's presence. When he woke and realized what had happened, the look on his face nearly broke her heart. "I should go," he said, already pulling away. I shouldn't have. "Stay." One word. It stopped him cold. "Kestrel, stay," she repeated, "and please." He stayed. After that, there was no pretending. No careful distance, no separate chambers, no political arrangement. Every night, Draven came to her rooms. Every night, they talked and touched and learned each other in ways that had nothing to do with duty. Every night, she fell deeper in love with the frozen king who looked at her like she was sunlight in endless winter. But she also noticed the changes. His skin was colder. His eyes were paler. The frost on the windows had spread to coat entire walls, even though it was summer outside. Servants whispered about pipes freezing, about gardens dying, about an impossible winter creeping through the castle. "You're getting worse," Kestrel said one night, watching him add another log to the fire he insisted on keeping roaring. "I'm fine." "You're shivering," in front of a fire large enough to roast a boar. He didn't answer. Draven. She crossed to him, taking his hands in hers despite the cold. "Talk to me." For a long moment he just looked at their joined hands. His fingers were nearly blue. "The curse strengthens with emotional connection," he said quietly. "I told you that." "Yes. What I didn't tell you is that there's a limit." He met her eyes, and she saw fear there. Real, profound fear. Past a certain point, the cold becomes fatal. Not to whoever I'm touching. To me. Kestrel's heart stopped. What? The curse is designed to make love impossible, not by killing the beloved. That would be too simple, too clean. His laugh was bitter. "No, the curse kills the one who loves. The more deeply I feel, the more the cold consumes me from the inside. Eventually, my heart will freeze solid." "How long?" "I don't know. Months. Weeks. It depends on—" He stopped, looking away. "On what?" "On whether I can stop feeling what I feel for you." The words hung between them like ice crystals in frozen air. "And can you?" Kestrel whispered. "Stop feeling it?" Draven pulled his hands free, moving away from her. His back was rigid, his shoulders hunched against some invisible weight. "I've been trying." His voice was hollow. "Since that first night. Since the first time you made me laugh. I've been trying to remember why I chose you. Because you were supposed to be safe. Because I wasn't supposed to care. But you do care." "Yes." The word came out broken. "God help me, yes." Kestrel moved toward him. He held up a hand, stopping her. "Don't," he said. "Please don't. Every time you touch me, every time you look at me with those eyes, it gets worse. I can feel the ice spreading through my chest. I can feel my heart slowing. Then we'll find a cure. There is no cure." He turned to face her, and she saw it now. The blue tinge to his lips, the frost creeping up his neck, the way his breath came in visible puffs even in the warm room. My great-great-grandfather tried. He consulted every witch, every healer, every magical practitioner in the known world. The curse cannot be broken. It can only be managed. By not loving anyone. By not loving anyone. The cruelty of it stole her breath. A curse that punished love with death. A man forced to choose between connection and survival. When were you planning to tell me? She asked, her voice shaking. Were you going to wait until you collapsed? Until I woke up next to a corpse? I was hoping. He stopped, passing a hand over his face. I was hoping I could control it. That I could care for you without falling. Without falling in love. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. But you have, haven't you? Kestrel stepped closer despite his warning. You've fallen in love with me. Kestrel, please. Say it. She was in front of him now, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his body, close enough to see the frost spreading across his cheekbones like delicate lacework. Say it, Draven. Tell me the truth. His eyes met hers, gray ice over desperate flame. Yes, he breathed. I love you. I've loved you since the moment you told me being my queen was an honor. Since you stood before my council and refused to flinch. Since you kissed me back on our wedding night like I wasn't a monster. Kestrel's eyes burned with tears. You're not a monster. I'm a man who's going to die because he couldn't keep his distance. He laughed and the sound was terrible, ice cracking, hearts breaking. I tried so hard, Kestrel. I told myself you meant nothing. I told my council, my advisors, anyone who would listen. I thought if I said it enough times, it would become true. She means nothing to me. The memory of those words, overheard through a cracked door, hit her like a physical blow. But now she understood. Now she heard what she'd been too hurt to hear before. He hadn't been declaring indifference. He'd been begging himself to feel it. The night of the council meeting, she said slowly. When you told Lord Brennick, I meant nothing. I was trying to convince myself. His voice cracked. It wasn't working. Kestrel reached for him, but before her hands could make contact, Draven's eyes rolled back. His body convulsed. He collapsed. Draven! She caught him before he hit the ground, his weight nearly crushing her. His skin was ice. Not just cold, but ice. Actual frost forming on his arms, his chest, spreading across his throat toward his face. Help! Kestrel screamed. Someone help! The door burst open. Guards flooded in, followed by Marisol, her face white with terror. The king! Kestrel gasped, cradling his frozen body. Something's wrong. He collapsed. His heart. Marisol took one look and started shouting orders. Healers were summoned. Servants came running with warming blankets that seemed to have no effect, the room filled with chaos and fear and the awful, awful cold. But through it all, Kestrel held her husband's hand and refused to let go. Stay with me, she whispered, her tears freezing against her cheeks. Please, Draven. Please stay with me. He didn't respond. His heartbeat slowed, and the frost kept spreading. The royal healers worked through the night. Kestrel refused to leave Draven's side, even when they begged her to rest, even when exhaustion made her vision blur and her legs threatened to buckle. She sat beside his bed, holding his frozen hand, watching the frost creep further across his skin with every passing hour. By dawn, his lips were blue. By midday, ice crystals had formed in his hair. By evening, the healers stepped back with hollow eyes and shaking heads. There's nothing more we can do, Your Majesty, the head healer said gently. The cold is coming from within. We can warm his exterior, but his heart? She trailed off. His heart is freezing solid. At this rate, he has days, perhaps hours. No. Kestrel's voice cracked. No, there has to be something. Some spell, some remedy, some... The curse cannot be broken by conventional means. The healer's face was etched with genuine sorrow. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. We've failed you both. The healers filed out, leaving Kestrel alone with her dying husband. She stared at his face, so beautiful, even now, even blue-tinged and frost-covered. 3 months ago, she would have laughed at the idea of loving this cold, distant king. 3 months ago, she would have accepted his death as inevitable, as just another cruelty in a life full of them. But that was before she knew him. Before the late-night conversations and shared laughter and the desperate way he kissed her, like she was the only warmth in his endless winter. Think, she commanded herself. There has to be something. The curse strengthened with emotional connection. The more he loved, the colder he became. If she could make him stop loving her. But even as the thought formed, she rejected it. She'd tried that with her own feelings. Tried to guard her heart. Tried to maintain distance. It hadn't worked. Love didn't respond to logic or self-preservation. And even if she could somehow make him hate her, would she want to? Would she want to watch the light die in his eyes, replaced by the cold indifference she'd once mistaken for his true nature? No. There had to be another way. Your Majesty. Kestrel turned to find Lord Severin standing in the doorway, his expression a careful mask of concern that didn't reach his eyes. Lord Severin. She didn't bother hiding her hostility. Now is not the time. On the contrary, now is precisely the time. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The king is dying, and certain arrangements must be made. What arrangements? Succession, for one. Without an heir, the throne passes to the council's choice, and the council has already begun discussing candidates. Kestrel's blood ran cold. He's not dead yet. But he will be. Soon. Severin moved closer, his gaze fixed on Draven's frozen form. Unless, of course, someone intervenes. What are you saying? Severin smiled, that oily, calculating smile she'd come to despise. I'm saying, Your Majesty, that I know how to break the curse. The words hit her like a lightning bolt. That's impossible. The healers are limited by their conventional understanding. Severin's eyes glittered. But I have access to unconventional resources, ancient texts, forbidden knowledge, the kind of power that created the curse in the first place. If you knew how to break it, why haven't you come forward before? Because breaking the curse comes at a price. He stepped closer still, until he was standing directly beside her. A price I'm now prepared to discuss. Kestrel's stomach turned. What price? Support. When the time comes for new leadership, whether through the king's death or his abdication, I want your public endorsement. Your declaration that I would be the best choice to guide Valdres through whatever transition comes next. You want me to help you take his throne? I want you to help me save Valdres from the chaos of a power vacuum. Severin's mask of concern slipped, revealing naked ambition beneath. Draven has been a competent ruler, I'll grant, but his curse makes him vulnerable, unstable. The kingdom needs strength. Not a king who could collapse at any moment because he felt too deeply about a trade agreement. Get out. Consider carefully, Your Majesty. Without my help, he dies. With it, he lives. Diminished, perhaps, but alive. All I ask in return is, get out. Severin's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. My only mistake was listening to you for even one moment. Kestrel rose, putting herself between Severin and Draven's bed. Whatever knowledge you claim to have, whatever cure you're dangling, I don't believe you. I think you'd say anything to advance your position. Then he dies, and you lose everything. Severin shrugged, turning toward the door. But perhaps that's what you want. Perhaps the Shadowborn would prefer to be a widow than a wife. He was gone before she could respond. Kestrel stood trembling in the empty room, her mind racing. Severin was lying. He had to be. He couldn't possibly know how to break a curse that had defeated generations of Valdris kings. And yet, ancient texts, forbidden knowledge. She thought of the Shadowborn curse, of the crescent scar on her cheek, and everything it represented. Her entire life, she'd been told her curse was a mark of evil, a sign of demonic influence, something to be suppressed and hidden. But what if that wasn't the whole truth? What if Shadowborns weren't cursed at all? The thought crystallized suddenly, sharp and clear. Shadowborns were born during blood eclipses, moments when the moon turned red, when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grew thin. They were marked by lunar magic, touched by forces older than any curse, forces that might be stronger than any curse. Kestrel looked down at her hands. She'd never tried to access her Shadowborn abilities. She'd spent her whole life suppressing them, hiding them, and pretending they didn't exist. But she could feel them now. A darkness coiled at her core, waiting to be unleashed. What if my curse is the cure? It was insane. It was desperate. It was probably going to kill her. But she was out of options. Kestrel knelt beside Draven's bed and took his frozen hand in both of hers. She closed her eyes, reaching deep inside herself, searching for the shadow that had lived in her since birth. She found it immediately. Not a monster. Not a demon. Just power. Raw, unrefined, vast beyond imagining. It had been waiting for her, patient as moonlight, ready to be claimed. Help me, she thought. Please. Help me save him. The shadow stirred, and something ancient woke up. The power that flooded through Kestrel was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It was darkness and moonlight, eclipse and shadow, the cold clarity of a winter night, and the fierce heat of a dying star. It filled her completely, stretching her from the inside, making her more than she'd ever been. She opened her eyes and saw the room transformed. Everything was limned in silver light, the bed, the walls, Draven's frozen form. She could see the curse now, actually see it. A web of ice magic wrapped around his heart, tendrils of ancient malevolence digging into his chest like parasitic roots, and she could see how to destroy it. Kestrel? The voice came from behind her. Kestrel turned to find Marisol standing in the doorway, her face white with shock. Your eyes? Marisol whispered. They're silver. Get out, Kestrel said. Her voice resonated strangely, layered with harmonics that weren't quite human. Get everyone out of this wing, now. Your Majesty, what are you— Now, Marisol, and no matter what you hear, no matter what you see, don't let anyone enter this room. The maid fled. Kestrel turned back to Draven. The frost had spread to cover his entire body now, transforming him into a sculpture of ice, a frozen monument to a curse that should never have existed. She placed her hands on his chest, directly over his heart. I don't know if you can hear me, she said quietly, but I need you to fight. Whatever happens next, don't give up. Don't let go. Then she unleashed her power. The darkness poured out of her like a flood breaking through a dam. It crashed against the curse with the force of a tidal wave, shadow against ice, moon against winter. The room shook, the walls cracked. Somewhere in the distance she heard screaming. But Kestrel held on. The curse fought back viciously. It was old, so old, crafted by a witch who had understood the deepest workings of magic and malice. It had been designed to be unbreakable, to punish love with death for all eternity. But it had never encountered a Shadowborn. Kestrel pushed deeper, her power tearing at the curse's foundations. She could see its history now, the bitter witch who had created it, the Valdris king who had wronged her, the generations of frozen hearts that had followed. She saw Draven's mother, dying with ice in her veins while her 3-year-old son screamed. She saw Draven himself, spending decades building walls around his heart, trying to survive a curse that punished his every attempt at connection. No more, she thought fiercely. This ends tonight. She gathered every ounce of power she possessed and pushed. The curse shattered. The backlash threw her across the room, slamming her against the far wall hard enough to crack stone. Pain exploded through her body, ribs broken, head spinning, blood trickling from her nose and ears. But she forced her eyes open in time to see the ice on Draven's body begin to melt. Water streamed off him, pooling on the bed, dripping to the floor. Color returned to his cheeks. His chest rose and fell with actual breath. His eyes opened. "Kestrel?" She tried to respond, but darkness was crowding at the edges of her vision. She'd given too much, pushed too hard. The power that had saved him was now devouring her from within. "Kestrel!" She heard him scrambling off the bed, heard his footsteps crossing the room, felt his hands, warm hands, actually warm, cradling her broken body. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice ragged with fear. "What did you do?" "Broke it," she managed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The curse. It's gone. I don't care about the curse. I care about you." He was crying, she realized. Actual tears streaming down his face, warm and wet against her skin. "Stay with me, Kestrel, please. Don't leave me." "Tired," she mumbled. "So tired. No. No. You don't get to save my life, and then die. That's not how this works." He pressed his forehead against hers, his warmth seeping into her cold flesh. "I love you. Do you hear me? I love you. And I won't let you go." She wanted to respond. She wanted to tell him she loved him too, that breaking his curse had been worth it, that she would choose him over her own survival 1,000 times. But the darkness was too heavy. The silence was too sweet. Kestrel closed her eyes and let go. She woke to sunlight. Not the gray, muted light that filtered through Valdris's perpetually cloudy skies. Actual sunlight, golden and warm, streaming through windows that had been thrown wide open. Kestrel blinked, confused. Her body ached everywhere, but it was the ache of healing, not dying. Bandages wrapped her ribs. Something cool and soothing had been applied to her head. "You're awake." She turned her head and found Draven sitting beside her bed, looking exhausted and terrified, and more beautiful than she'd ever seen him. He was warm, not just absence of cold warm, actually, genuinely, radiantly warm, like sunlight made flesh. "The curse," she croaked. "Gone." His voice broke on the word. "You broke it. Completely, not just for me, for my entire bloodline. Whatever children we have, they'll be free." Whatever children we have. The casual assumption in those words made her heart skip. How long was I out? 3 days. He took her hand, and the warmth of his touch made her want to weep. 3 days of not knowing if you'd wake up. 3 days of watching you lie there like... He stopped, visibly struggling to compose himself. "I'm sorry," Kestrel whispered. "Don't you dare apologize." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a tenderness that stole her breath. "You saved my life. You saved my entire family line. You broke a curse that has tormented my ancestors for 7 generations. But you're also an idiot," he continued, his voice hardening. "A beautiful, brave, completely insane idiot who almost died performing magic she'd never used before to save a man who told his entire court she meant nothing to him." Kestrel laughed, then winced as her ribs protested. "When you put it that way, it does sound pretty foolish." "It sounds heroic." He leaned closer, his eyes burning into hers. "It sounds like the kind of thing a true queen would do. Not a political arrangement, not a convenient solution. A queen who loves her king enough to sacrifice everything for him." I do love you, Kestrel said softly. I know you didn't want me to. I know it was supposed to be. He kissed her. Not the careful, measured kisses they'd shared before. This was heat and hunger and desperate relief, the kiss of a man who had almost lost everything and was determined to hold on to what remained. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. I have something to tell you, Draven said. Several things, actually. I'm listening. First, Lord Severin has been arrested. He was working with your father to destabilize my rule. They'd planned to use the curse against me, wait for me to die, then install themselves as regents for whatever unfortunate noble they married to the next in line. Kestrel's blood chilled. My father? He arrived at the castle yesterday with documents proving his rightful claim to guide the transition of power. Unfortunately for him, he arrived to find me very much alive and very much aware of his plotting. Draven's jaw tightened. He's in the dungeons now, awaiting trial. She should have felt something. Anger, betrayal, vindication. Instead, she just felt tired. What will happen to him? That depends largely on what you want. Draven's expression softened. He's your father, however poor a one he's been. If you want mercy, I want justice. The words came out stronger than she expected. Not revenge, but justice. For my mother, who he blamed for my curse. For me, for 23 years of persecution for something I couldn't control. For whatever other victims his cruelty has created. Draven nodded slowly. Then justice he shall have. And Ondine? My sister? She testified against him. At Kestrel's shocked expression, Draven almost smiled. Apparently, discovering that her father had plotted to murder the king and exploit her sister's position was too much even for her loyalty. She's asked to speak with you, when you're ready. She says she has much to apologize for. Kestrel absorbed this. Her sister, who had hated her for so long, choosing truth over family loyalty. It didn't erase the years of cruelty, but it was a beginning. You said several things, she reminded him. What else? Draven's expression grew serious. I owe you a public declaration. What do you mean? The night before the contract signing, I told Lord Brennick you meant nothing to me. I said it to protect myself, to convince myself I wasn't falling for you, but the words were still spoken. And you overheard them. Kestrel's throat tightened. You knew? Marisol told me. She saw you in the corridor afterward. Saw your face. Pain flickered across his features. I should have corrected the lie immediately. Instead, I let my fear keep me silent. Draven. No, let me finish. He stood, moving to the window, silhouetted against the sunlight. Tomorrow, the entire court will gather for a formal announcement. They believe they're coming to witness my recovery and thank the healers for their efforts. But that's not what's happening. He turned to face her, and his expression made her heart stop. What's happening, he said, is that the Alpha King of Valdris is going to stand before his entire kingdom and declare that his queen is everything to him. That she saved his life through the power of her love. That she is not a curse or a convenience or a political arrangement, but the most important person in his world. Tears blurred Kestrel's vision. You don't have to. I want to. He crossed back to her bedside, taking her hand again. I spent months lying to my court, to myself, to you. Tomorrow I tell the truth. And every day after that, for the rest of our lives, I tell the truth again. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. You mean everything to me, Kestrel. Everything. She reached up, cupping his warm, actually warm, face in her hands. I know, she whispered. I've always known. Even when you were trying to convince us both otherwise. He laughed, and the sound was pure joy, unfrozen, unlocked, and free at last. I love you, he said. I love you too. Outside, the sun continued to shine over Valdres, melting the last traces of impossible winter. And inside, a cursed king and a shadow-born queen held each other, finally understanding what neither had believed possible. Love had won. The great hall of Valdres Castle blazed with celebration. Kestrel stood beside her husband, one hand resting on the swell of her belly, watching the dancers swirl across the polished floor. Everything was different now. The perpetual gray skies had cleared, the gardens bloomed with flowers that hadn't grown in decades, and the castle itself seemed warmer, lighter, as if breathing freely for the first time. "What are you thinking?" Draven murmured, his arm wrapped around her waist. "That I never imagined I'd be here." She leaned into his warmth. "That a year ago, I was standing on an auction platform, certain no one would ever want me. I wanted you." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "From the first moment I saw you." "You wanted a political solution." "I told myself I wanted a political solution." His hand moved to rest over hers on her belly. "But some part of me always knew." Kestrel smiled. "Marisol says it will be a boy." "Marisol is an optimist. It will be a girl, and she will have her mother's eyes and her mother's stubborn courage." "And her father's tendency toward dramatic declarations?" He grinned, actually grinned, the expression still new enough to make her heart flutter. "One can only hope." Across the hall, Kestrel spotted her sister Ondine talking with a group of young nobles. Their relationship was still mending, fragile as new ice in spring, but they were trying. Monthly letters had become weekly visits. Accusations had become apologies, then understanding, then something approaching genuine sisterhood. Their father rotted in a distant prison, stripped of title and lands. Kestrel had not visited him. She doubted she ever would. "Your Majesties." Lord Brennick appeared before them, his manner much changed from the hostile counselor who had once challenged Draven's choice. "The delegation from the Southern Territories has arrived. They're most eager to discuss the new trade agreements." "Tell them we'll receive them tomorrow," Draven said. "Tonight is for celebration, not negotiation." Brennick bowed and retreated. "He's almost polite now," Kestrel observed. "Amazing what a demonstration of power will do for people's manners." Draven's eyes sparkled. "They all watched you break a 7-generation curse through sheer will. Even the ones who still fear Shadowborns are too awed to show it. I don't want them to fear me." "No, but a little healthy respect doesn't hurt." He turned her to face him fully, his hands settling on her hips. "Dance with me." "Here? Now? Where else? When else?" He pulled her closer. "I spent 30 years avoiding touch. I intend to make up for lost time." They danced. Not the formal, measured steps of state functions, but something slower, more intimate. Draven held her close, his warmth seeping through her gown, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. Around them, courtiers watched with varying degrees of fascination and joy. The king who had once radiated cold now radiated love. The Shadowborn who had been deemed worthless now carried the future of the kingdom in her womb. "I need to tell you something," Kestrel murmured. "Hmm?" "A year ago, in this very hall, you told your council I meant nothing." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "I was listening. I heard every word." Draven's expression flickered with old pain. "I know. I was devastated," she continued. "I thought my heart would break. I thought every hope I'd ever harbored was foolish and naive. Kestrel. But I was wrong." She reached up, touching his face with infinite tenderness. Those words weren't the truth. They were a desperate lie told by a man terrified of his own capacity to love. And despite them, because of them, maybe, we found our way here. To this moment. To this life. She smiled, tears glittering in her eyes. "I wouldn't change a single thing. Not the auction, not the contract, not even the pain. It all led to this." Draven pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "She means everything to me," he said, loud enough for the nearby courtiers to hear. "Do you know that? This woman is my entire world." Kestrel laughed through her tears. "I think they've figured that out by now." "I don't care. I'll say it every day until they're thoroughly sick of hearing it." He lifted his head, his eyes burning into hers. "She means everything to me. My queen. My mate. My heart." She kissed him then, in full view of the entire court, scandal and protocol be damned. And somewhere in the shadows of the great hall, a servant who had known the castle for 50 years wiped tears from her eyes, marveling at a miracle she'd never expected to see. The frozen king had finally melted. Love had finally won. "She means nothing to me," the Alpha King told his pack, unaware she was listening. Those words shattered Kestrel's heart. They were meant to protect him from a curse that punished love with death. They were meant to convince himself that the Shadowborn queen he'd chosen at the offering was merely a political convenience. But words spoken in fear are not the same as truth. And sometimes, the lies we tell to protect ourselves become the walls that imprison us. When the curse finally came for him, when ice crept through his veins and his heart began to freeze, it was the woman who meant nothing who saved him. It was her love, powerful, stubborn, and relentless, that shattered a 7-generation curse and freed not just the king, but his entire bloodline. In the end, the Shadowborn and the Frozen King discovered the same truth: that love is stronger than any curse, any lie, any fear. And that sometimes meaning everything to someone starts with being told, "You mean nothing at all." Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and they mean more than you know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story. Until next time.